What that means is that if you hear a specific version of a politics dis-ad, you should go cut specific answers to that. Just because you have my 2AC block to politics does not mean you have a block to that politics dis-ad. They are all very different. Spending dis-ads are not the same as budget dis-ads, are not the same as, economy dis-ads are not all the same. You need to have different 2AC blocks to every argument that you've heard, especially if you don't have a carded response to it, and then you can't find evidence to answer that question. You need to have cross applications from the 1AC, like cross-apply my Bowers 1998 evidence that answers this argument, or something like that. So you need to, and at least thinking about them and writing them in that block format are going to help you. Mark said earlier that you probably don't need your blocks after you've been working with your case for a long time, but part of understanding your case and part of getting to know all of this stuff is writing that blocks. That process helps you remember those arguments, and then so when you're going at 1,000,000 miles an hour or 2 miles an hour or whatever it is, you can just say those arguments and then find the cards and fill those into the blocks because you'll already know what they are. So block writing is absolutely essential. Whenever there's an argument that's new to you, that you haven't heard before, write it down and make sure to go home and do research on it. If anything, like before you go to bed in the hotel, like try to find a couple cards that answer that argument and print them off and save them for the next day. So that means that whenever round 5, if say Jess and Brandon were debating, and Jess was like, well, Brandon had this politics dis-ad that I didn't have an answer to. So round 5, when Sarah comes up and says, hey Jess, what did Brandon run against you? Or politics. Say Sarah and Jess are on the same team. She can hand him the answers. Like he's going to run this argument. It also helps your teammates out a lot. And it keeps your intelligence up because you're like, I know exactly what their arguments are. I know what they're going to say against my stuff. That means that their team's probably going to say something similar. And it's not likely that people are going to do a lot of different research for one case. So if you can figure out what one person from a school is running, you can usually figure out what that whole team is running, and so that just saved you, that maybe wins Sarah the debate round as opposed to Sarah being caught. So, sorry, block writing.
Yeah, and responsible block writing too. Like, just because you find an argument or a card that says, this is sort of non-unique or something like that, doesn't mean you're done. You need to be able to make good responses to dis-ads consistently, and they need to be the responses you thought about in the calm of your reflective time in the hotel room when you're meditating before you go to bed. Okay, so a caveat to sort of dictating the vague and selectively undercovering. It's probably not a good idea in the community to do that to T. Like, I think in most cases you don't want to be stuck in 2AR having to give an explanation of how you get out of T. Suicide T in the 1R is still something that I think the time trade-offs hurt the affirmative pretty badly. So you probably want to convince them that going for T is not in their best interests. Maybe this is wrong. Maybe you think that going for T or the defending T in the 2AR is really easy. Maybe you have a judge who doesn't like T. In those situations, yeah, go for it. But I think by and large, sort of a rule of thumb, not a good idea. Is there any? Do we have a different?
No, I think that's fair. The easy way out of that is to pick a case that's straight up topical.
Yeah.
If you don't want to deal with topicality debates, pick something that people are going to be like, all right, that's topical. Most people, most judges don't like the substantially increased T or something like that. Like the best topicality debates this year are going to be on what Cuba is, whether or not it's the government or the people or whatever. And I guarantee you, every round, somebody's going to have a reason why your form of constructive engagement is not constructive engagement. So pick something that's really straight up the middle when it comes to constructive engagement. It's probably best to engage the Cuban government, and you'll probably be okay. And at least judges will be able to give you a little slack there. You're probably not going to have to spend as much time if you're just really topical and you have really good evidence to back it up. So, that's another thing. It's important in topicality debates to have blocks to other people's interpretations of topicality, the same way you would have blocks to other people's dis-ads or idea of what an economy or politics dis-ad should look like. If I know that Mark is running this version of constructive engagement is unconditional, and I have conditions in my plan text, I should have A, reasons to defend my definition of constructive engagement, and B, reasons why constructive, answers to his definition. And so you can read arguments against people and have more definitions the same way you would answer a dissent. So you should have blocks to people's T violations as well, especially if they're really wacky.
One other thing, or another way to give a more effective rebuttal in my most humble is to change the order. I think when you do that, it makes you look like you're controlling the round. It's less like you're giving a responsive 1AR and more like you're giving a speech that's changing the shape of the round, like you're deploying a strategy, not merely that you're responding to someone else's strategy. But don't change the order randomly, like just to do it. And I think there's some general principles that are at work in what an effective order for 1AR is. I think everyone, especially if you're running a more complicated case, should start the 1AR with an overview. You need to explain to the judge in 3 sentences what your case does, how it escapes their dissents, or how their dissents are irrelevant, and why your impacts are more important, or why your philosophical understandings are more important than anything you're saying. If you've got a janky framework, why your framework is the one we should be using and how that wins you the round. Like, have that sort of 3-sentence explanation of why none of their stuff sticks and you're winning this round. Possibly easy to do, and can also save you a lot of time later down the flow if you're making a very, very short version of the arguments that you're going to cross-apply a lot. Because then you're giving the analysis once instead of giving the analysis 6 times, or giving the analysis twice and then giving kind of a rehash of it 4 more times. Like, I think that's very effective and very effective time-saving tool.
One more thing that it's also persuasive to do is kind of getting the judge into it is using what just happened in CX. We'll talk about CX and labs and the importance of CX to debate rounds, but like these debate rounds are so short that to ignore that time that you get to basically make fun of the other person and their arguments and not cross-apply some of those arguments in your speech. Start off by saying, oh my God, I cannot believe that they just conceded whatever. That devastates their dissent. And then go talk about the dissent. That's an easy way to, bring CX conversations into that speech. It's great ways to introduce the speech kind of things, so your little teaser or whatever you want to call it, but using CX in these speeches can also save you time. And using cross-X to flush out things, like I've seen debate rounds where people cross-X them so well that people conceded whole sheets of paper in cross-X. And so, like, I would never do that. I would never suggest it. I would kind of just avoid the questions and answer nebulously and make them make the arguments. But yeah, so you should never concede pieces of paper in cross-X. But if you have questions that are like phrased correctly, they can become arguments. You shouldn't be arguing in CX, but you should use your arguments to your advantage. And this goes back to what Mark was talking about, the time constraints. You're so limited in the time that you have that any cross-application from cross-X would be like, listen, they conceded that my piece of evidence answers this argument in cross-X. That means I shouldn't have to spend very much time here and make one other argument and then move on. Like, you should use cross-X to your advantage and use it as, I guess, constructively as you can.